Sorry, what was the? Should we respond to the question? Or
Either one.
I mean, you have to consider that you must understand the fear in an employee of the NSA to be a whistleblower, or for any government intelligence agency at that, which, by the way, there's a laundry list of, I don't know how many, off Wikipedia, there's like 20 listed at least, on just a simple list. But there's so many intelligence agencies, and there's such a pressure that you will be punished for speaking out against the government.
He wouldn't have done it if he didn't think the information he had something to add to this supposedly already existing debate. The fact is, yes, the debate sort of existed in a vague sort of way, but the public was largely unaware, and that's a fact.
In the speech he gave, or in the interview he gave, one of the things he said was, "It's not about me, it's about starting this conversation," right? And that's a great way to start it, to maybe have some more effectual reforms occurring. Unfortunately, I don't know that's gonna happen.
Your turn.
So I'd just like to point out the Espionage Act that Edward Snowden is being convicted under was made in 1917 at the beginning of the first Red Scare, and I just wanted to ask if you saw any parallels between the way they went after alleged communists and what later came out to be innocent Americans who were just closely related by maybe a step or two. And what we're doing now with whistleblowers and with innocent Americans who also have their calls tapped because they have too few links with an alleged terrorist. So that's directed to both parties.
You wish to respond?
Yes, sir. Again, the Justice Department, with regard to Snowden, he was charged. He was not convicted. He's in Russia. He was charged with espionage and theft of government property. That's another big crime under the Espionage Act of 1917. I do believe that the Justice Department and Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, did say we are open to a plea bargain. They're not saying that they're going to hang him high. They're going to say that, yes, admit what you did and plea out for some of these things, for what you did with them.
Libertarians, you wish to respond?
We have, as we've expressed, we seriously doubt this promise for due process for Edward Snowden.
Okay, I saw other hands. Right here.
So earlier you guys were talking about...
I'm sorry, when you say you guys...
Democrats. Okay. So the Democrats earlier said that the NSA programs do not violate the Constitution because it's spying on foreigners, it's not spying on U.S. citizens, and they said the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to foreigners. The way that the NSA determines who is a foreigner and who is not, because this is all done, they're not spying on people per se, they're spying on computers, they're spying on messages that get sent from one computer to another computer. And the algorithm that they've said that they use is a combination of things like Google searches, web history, things like that, to develop a profile to try to figure out whether the user is an American or a foreigner. And what they've said is their threshold for declaring somebody to be a foreigner and thus an acceptable target for espionage is they want 51% confidence. So in other words, they want the tiniest bit above a coin toss as to whether or not the person they're spying on is a foreigner or not. Do you think that's an acceptable burden of proof or an acceptable threshold of certainty before which you can dispense with someone's Fourth Amendment rights?
Again, I don't see how the Fourth Amendment here is being violated by what the NSA is doing with the data collection. What they're doing, they're collecting your phone numbers, they're collecting they're collecting phone numbers, they're collecting duration of calls, length of calls. That's the information that they're collecting. They're not collecting content. The Fourth Amendment was designed, the original intent behind the Fourth Amendment was to protect the content of information, the content of your papers, the content of your house, the content of whatever, the content of your private property. We're not going into phone calls. That, again, I go back to the fact that's the FBI, that's not the NSA. If there is real reason for the FBI to come in, that's when the NSA would turn this over to another agency who would in turn go to a FISA court, get a warrant, and then go and listen
You're
to
not
your
really
proposals.
addressing my question. My question was, do you think that, because you earlier used the justification that we're spying on foreigners, we're not spying on American citizens. So let's say we're talking about something that we all agree unambiguously is a Fourth Amendment violation, and then you justify it saying it's only foreigners, it's not U.S. citizens. Do you think the 51% threshold is an acceptable threshold to say for certain that this person is a foreigner, and thus we can violate their Fourth Amendment rights because they don't have any?
Look, if you have someone's IP address, you have a very high certainty of where they're from. If you have someone's phone number,
You have a high certainty of where they are, not where they're from.
an IP address is, connected to your computer. You're right in saying that you don't have 100% certainty, and that's why our argument is that under the Fourth Amendment, metadata is not protected. So, even if it turns out somehow to be an American, under the Fourth Amendment, it's legal to look at that metadata because it's not data that wouldn't have been public anyway. You have many, many people looking at this data by your service provider, and there's a very high certainty that can be had.
All right.
I'd just like to respond that I think it's a very convenient extrapolation to say that metadata is not covered by the Fourth Amendment because metadata did not exist when the Fourth Amendment was written. And it wasn't possible to get the time and the origin of messages at the time the Fourth Amendment was written. So it is very convenient to say that that is not protected. Thank you.
Additionally, the College Democrats established that the content of calls is not and should not be protected for intelligence gathering purposes. Nucleon, Google it. It's a program. We use it. It gets the content of calls, not just the the little timestamp information. The content.
We have time
Okay.
for one more question.
Yeah. Someone who didn't ask a question before, you.
On the subject of President Obama's proposed reforms, the College Libertarians, you guys have been very critical of the NSA and its programs as well as President Obama's reforms. But I was wondering what specific reforms you would be looking for because you haven't really proposed any changes yourselves.
Sure. There are many things, but a few of them would be one, he's basically pushed off this metadata collection to third parties. That will happen. Watch it. It's hard to do that, but the AT&T, if you have AT&T, will start collecting your information. They might be pushed into it by the government. They might not even want to do it. That's going to happen. The government will have access to it regardless. Just they won't have the mass data right there. They'll say, okay, well, we need from this. Okay, they still have it. He's completely ignored the recommendations of the board he set up to review the issue of intelligence gathering, and he ignored the recommendation that they should mix certain NSA programs. For example, certain stipulations within the Nucleon program and PRISM. He's ignored those. We still haven't addressed the whistleblower issue. We still say that no, if you're a whistleblower, you're deemed a traitor. We haven't addressed that issue when really we need people like that who bring up the concerns of our national security and
That's
help
not
to
necessarily to
I'd like to,
reform, though.
I'd like to add
That's
to that.
criticizing his reforms. What
Yeah.
would you like to see? So do you
I
not
mean,
want third parties to have the data at all?
Specifically, the kind of reform we'd like to see is no, we wouldn't want third parties to be able to give. I mean, if you're volunteering your information to a private company, that should not give the government the right to take it from the private company. That's not how it should work. We want a lot more transparency, and we want a way, way higher burden of proof if somebody's going to take my information.
Additionally, not so much waste. There's a lot of gathering procedures out there that actually don't do anything. We just waste a lot
Severe
of money on a
cutbacks.
fiscal issue.
And
It's
we want, what's the name?
unsustainable.
We want complete, that program, that
Nucleon.
Nucleon. If you're a U.S. citizen, Nucleon should not be an option for you.
Okay, I think we need to stop. I think each side has a closing statement. Democrats can go first.
We must utilize the resources and information available under United States law to protect American lives and the American way of life. Now, with that said, there must be a balance of power to protect abuse of the system, which, by the way, has been discovered in only 5 or 6 cases and very limited as compared to the 27 actual prosecutions under the FISA program. The The President's plan hits a perfect balance of security and constitutional privacy of American citizens. Included in this plan are the President's continued advocacy of a third-party holder of telecommunications data already being maintained by wireless carriers and found in court to be completely constitutional under the Fourth Amendment. Further, any requests for data must be court-approved, and it requires reasonable suspicion, and we're also adding the 2-hop rule from the 3-hop rule, which means that an exponential number of data that could have previously been accessed is no longer even accessible to the NSA or any other government organization. The President has also called for increased transparency in government requests under the Patriot Act. 45 court proceedings have already been made publicly available. When the FBI requests data of an individual or corporation, those people requested or corporations requested are able to talk about this within 1 year. There's also going to be increased transparency under the President's reforms that allows communications corporations to release more specific data and information on those requests that they receive for the government for any purpose. It is our government's responsibility to prevent attacks and save innocent lives, not just respond to the next attack on American lives. Any further reduction of the NSA program will harm our government's ability to carry out this duty to protect our nation. In a time of increasing technological and increasing challenges in ability to track information abroad in organizations that are decentralized and remote, such as Al-Qaeda. The NSA program does not jeopardize Americans' liberties, but rather helps protect American lives.
Thank you. The Libertarians?
Thank you. Thomas Jefferson once said, "In matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock." The fact is that privacy and due process are both founding principles of our country. And just because the style now is metadata, we cannot let our technological capabilities dictate our activities, because then things will just spiral out of control. When does it stop? While we're sure that the infallible Obama has struck a perfect balance, as our friends say, we would like to be able to see it for ourselves. We'd like to be able to judge for ourselves. We would like more transparency. The fact is that if we let fear dictate us to protect us from the terrorists, guess what a terrorist's main instrument is? Fear. Terror. So we're compromising ourselves, and you know what? That's letting them win, if we really want to talk about that. What are we even protecting at this point, if we're compromising so many of our founding principles? We agree that the United States is held to higher standards, and because of this, we think that there does need to be a lot more oversight and a lot more transparency. Thank you.